Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hey, friends. Welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Carrie.
How are you doing today?
Good. I'm Christmas partied out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tis the fucking season.
I have had more bourbon in the last 72 hours, and my liver is like, dude, can I get a break? Like, just
So
poor liver.
are you drinking for this episode or no?
I am, but not bourbon.
Okay.
I need a little break.
Okay, so what you got?
Yes. I have Carbless. This one is Carbless for those that aren't in Wisconsin. I don't know if Carbless is actually distributing outside of the state of Wisconsin yet, but it's so amazing and they are tasty.
Yeah, they're pretty damn good.
What about you? What are you drinking?
I am trying a new one. This is Still Austin bourbon.
You know, you're smart. You get the little guys so that you can like taste test a whole bunch of different kinds to see what you like, what you don't like. I have never done that. I need to do that.
It's nice to try them and then be like, "Meh," or yeah, I'll get a bigger bottle at that sometime.
Yeah, you're not starting with a big bottle and you're like, well, what the fuck am I going to do with this now?
Yeah. Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
Clink, clink.
Can I just do a quick update on some sentencing and court outcomes from episode 33, Jennifer Wallace and Jalen Walker?
Yeah.
So Jennifer Wallace was the victim of a murder for hire plot by a woman named Melody Sasser. Y'all, if you haven't listened to this episode, you should go listen to it. It's pretty interesting and also weird and creepy as fuck. But I wanted to give an update because Melody Sasser, she was actually sentenced to 100 months, very specific, in jail. So that's just over like 8 years. And I'm sorry, I said jail. That's not true. Federal prison. So she's going to be doing her time in federal prison. And she will also be on supervised release for 3 years once she is out, when she does her time. And she also has to pay around $5,400 to Jennifer Wallace for damages.
Wow.
In the murder of 14-year-old Jalen Walker, which was the second case of episode 33, her killer, Isaac Arndt, was her ex-boyfriend. And Isaac was scheduled to appear in court in early November. However, the proceedings for his court appearances are actually on hold because in order for a competency evaluation was filed on November 5th to evaluate his mental state. Meanwhile, he was arraigned on October 9th. So before the November, I think the court date was supposed to be November 6th. And on November 5th, an order for a competency evaluation was put in. But the month prior, he was arraigned on the indictment for first-degree murder with premeditation and second-degree murder with intent. So again, I still am very fuzzy no matter how much research I do on what's the difference between first-degree murder with pre-med and second-degree murder with intent. I don't fucking know. But he was arraigned on indictment for both of those charges. This part is interesting, though. I've never seen this. His bail was set at $4 million without conditions, or $2 million with various conditions, including GPS monitoring if he posts bail. Meaning, if he's able to post bail, then there are no conditions set and he is free on bail until his court hearing. But if he can't afford that and he can afford to post 2 million bail, then there are various conditions of which weren't elaborated on, but one of them would be basically like an ankle bracelet until he was done with his court stuff.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have money for either, apparently, because he's still in jail
Good.
awaiting sentencing.
As he should be.
Not waiting a sentencing, waiting court trial. Yeah. So I just wanted to give an update on those because I had promised I would. It took forever for information to get out to the general public, but I was able to find stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Melody is doing some time and Arndt
Wow.
is still behind bars.
Nice. Well,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
So, this is episode 40 of Crime Will Tell. This case is going to take us across multiple states, but we're going to start on the beautiful East Coast in New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is about 50 miles south of Boston and has a population around 100,000. So, it's a pretty good sized
Hmm.
city. And in New Bedford, there was a bar called Puzzles Lounge, which was a popular gay bar. On February 1st of 2006, which was a Thursday night, there were maybe about 20 people just kind of hanging out at Puzzles, chatting with friends or playing pool, just enjoying a night out in what they felt was a very safe space for them. Puzzles was not a place that experienced any sort of violence or trouble. And in fact, according to an article in South Coast Today, in the 15 years that it was open, police in New Bedford actually hoped that other bars were more like Puzzles
Oh,
due to the lack of fights and drama that, would require intervention by law enforcement. So they were
huh.
like, this place is great. So, got to say, high five for the gays. We're a pretty chill people. And that's why like straight people go to gay bars because it's really just kind of a welcoming, relaxed environment. There's not fights, there's not a lot of drama.
That's why I went.
Yeah, it's chill as fuck. So later that night, a young man who was wearing black, baggy clothes kind of strolled into Puzzles. And he awkwardly walked up to the bar. He ordered a Captain Morgan on the rocks, kind of slammed it down pretty quickly, was a little bit nervous acting. And then he immediately ordered a second drink. And he asked the bartender who was working that night, his name is Philip Daggett, if he was in a gay bar. And the bartender was like, "Yeah, it's a gay bar, but it's not just gay people that hang out in here. Everybody's welcome." And he mentioned that there was this other kind of lesbian bar down the street, but the guy that had walked in was just he had like just a strange look on his face, and he just quietly looked at the bartender and he said, "No, this is the one that I want." Just a
Hmm.
very strange encounter. I want to point out that this guy was acting strange, but his behavior might not have been super uncommon because if someone is possibly struggling with or exploring their sexuality, they might have been a little bit anxious or nervous going into a gay bar possibly for the first time, and especially if they're alone. I
Mm.
think that can be kind of a nerve-wracking experience. So I'm sure this bartender had seen their fair share of baby gays that were trying to navigate their first time in a gay bar. But unfortunately, this isn't what was happening that night. Because just before midnight, calls began pouring into 911. And these calls were filled with screams for help and, just chaotic sounds in the background. Because after getting confirmation that he was in the right place and in a gay bar, this guy took the second drink that he'd ordered and he walked to the back of the bar where a small group of regulars, including Robert Perry and Alex Taylor, were playing pool. And this new guy was just kind of lurking around and watching them, sort of invading their pool playing space. Like, it's weird if you're not playing or part of a group if you're just standing by a pool table. You're
Hmm.
kind of in the fucking way and it's weird. And out of nowhere, he threw back his second drink and he pushed Alex Taylor down to the ground. He then took out a hatchet that was hidden underneath his hoodie and struck him in the face.
He doesn't know them.
No, nobody recognized this guy at first. Nobody knew who he was, which this was kind of a place for regulars. So,
So he slammed his drink, pushed down this Alex guy, took out a hatchet from under his hoodie, and buried it in his face,
yes.
unprovoked.
So shit went sideways really,
Wow.
really fast. So another man saw what was happening. He took a pool cue and tried hitting this guy, but he ended up grabbing it away from him and then began hitting the guy with it. Robert Perry saw his friend get attacked and tried to stop the attacker, but he was also struck in the face with the hatchet. And this ended up splitting his cheekbone in half and
Oh my
leaving like a
God.
huge gash in his cheek. The hatchet fortunately fell to the floor, and some other customers were able to knock the assailant down. He ended up getting hit in the head with a pool cue, which cut his head, and he started bleeding, but he was still able to get up. And he pulls out a fucking handgun and starts just firing shots around the bar, just
Oh
kind of
my
at first,
God.
just into the air. He walked over to Robert Perry, who was one of the men that he'd attacked with the hatchet, who was lying on the ground, and shot him, hitting him in the shoulder. He then walked over to another man, Luis Rosado, who was a 23-year-old man with intellectual disabilities who was just hanging out at the bar with his mom,
Oh my
and
gosh.
walked up and shot him. I believe he was coming out of the bathroom. Didn't know what was going on, just got shot. He tried crawling to his mom after being shot, but he lost consciousness before he could get to her.
Oh my God.
So through all this chaos, the bartender was trying to help other customers get out of the bar to safety. So he was kind of, escorting people out. When the attacker allegedly came over to him, pointing the gun directly at his head, he pulled the trigger, not sure if he ran out of bullets or if it jammed, but the gun didn't go off. Thank goodness.
Oh my
And so
God.
this panicked the gunman and he just fled out of the bar. He just ran off. Fortunately, none of the men attacked that night died from their injuries.
Really?
Yeah, they all survived. It
Oh.
was touch and go, especially Luis Rosado, the younger man who was shot. He was in very critical condition and wasn't expected to survive, but he did.
Oh, that's awesome.
But this attack definitely left a scar on the queer community in New Bedford. Puzzles ended up closing not long after the attack. I believe another gay bar opened in its place for a little while, but it ended up closing too.
Mm.
Now, there were plenty of witnesses in the bar that night that were able to give police a description of the attacker and, what he was wearing. They also were able to give a description of the car that he was driving, which was a dark green 1999 Pontiac Grand Am. And people even had the license plate number. So it was
Oh.
like they had all these pieces to start. And it really, really helped that one of the women in the bar that night had actually gone to high school with the attacker and recognized him.
Oh, so she knew who he was.
Yeah. And so with all of this info, it didn't take long for the suspect to be identified as 18-year-old Jacob Robida. He was obviously using a fake ID at the bar
To
that
get in.
night. I think it said that he was 23. But yeah, so he was 18-year-old Jacob Robida. Police immediately start looking for this asshole, and an APB went out for him. They went to his house where he lived with his mother, Stephanie Oliver. She told police that she had last seen her son around 1 o'clock that morning, so not long after the attacks, because this all happened around midnight. She said that he came to the house and he was bleeding from his head. He frantically just grabbed some of his belongings and left again with no explanation. So she was kind of like, he was here, he wasn't. I don't know what the fuck happened. So police went to Jacob's room and they were like, oh, fuck. Because they found a treasure trove of hate. He had Nazi posters all over his walls. There were swastika flags, a homemade coffin, all kinds of anti-Semitic and anti-LGBTQ plus information. There were notebooks filled with racist notes, guns, knives, hatchets, and copies of hate-filled books about the Holocaust and the Third Reich, including the Turner Diaries. If you don't have a copy, which I really hope you fucking don't, and you're unfamiliar, the Turner Diaries is a novel that was written by a white nationalist turd smear that depicts a very violent revolution that leads to the overthrow of the US government, a nuclear war, a race war, and the extermination of Jews and all non-white people.
Oh my God.
Awesome. The FBI has referred to this book as the Bible of the racist right, and it has inspired multiple terrorist attacks and hate crimes. This idiot even had like white power and Nazi symbol tattoos, including a swastika on his hand, which indicates that he was very proud of his views and didn't care who knew. I mean, if you put a tattoo on your hand,
Everybody gonna see.
yeah, you don't care who sees that shit.
So I'm certain that when Jacob arrived at home and his mom saw him acting strangely, bleeding from the head, and he grabbed some things and left, she promptly called the police, correct?
No.
Mm.
Like, I don't know how what the timeline was between him leaving and fleeing and the police arriving at her house. I don't think it was very long, but I did not find any information that she called authorities.
So it was probably all the 911 calls, and a patron just happened to be like, hey, I went to high school with that dude.
Yeah. And I
And
mean,
his,
and they had the license plate of his car, so they
yeah. And so they
immediately were
tracked
able
him.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I don't think it was very long before police were at the house and questioning her. But no, I don't believe that she called and was like, I think something's up with my son.
What a great
And
mom.
yeah, and obviously, I'm sorry. If your kid's room is filled with a bunch of hateful bullshit,
His body is filled with a bunch of hateful
yeah,
bullshit.
it didn't seem like there was any sort of intervention or concern by his parents. They searched Jacob's computer looking for any clues about his intentions for any other crimes or, maybe where he might be fleeing to. And they found some really dark shit on his MySpace profile. This was back in the days of MySpace.
I love me
And
a good MySpace profile.
I know. And they learned that Jacob was a juggalo.
Oh, wow.
A juggalo is
Oh, and not a gigolo, a
no, a
juggalo.
juggalo. Yeah, so they learned that
Oh,
yeah, oh good. Have
okay,
you never
okay.
heard of this?
I've never heard of juggalo, but certainly I've heard of a gigolo.
So they learned that Jacob was a juggalo, which is a hardcore fan of the hip hop duo Insane Clown Posse,
Okay.
or ICP, which is how they're commonly referred to. And they perform what is known as horrorcore, or music that has, kind of like supernatural or horror themed lyrics. And it's generally pretty shocking and violent. And, they discuss lighthearted topics like murder and cannibalism. You maybe have seen pictures. I mean, they have big festivals, and the actual artists wear white and black like clown makeup, and then a lot of juggalos do, but they're known for having these huge music festivals. It's kind of like a parrot head or a dead head, like these
Okay.
very faithful fans that go watch the Grateful Dead or Jimmy Buffett, and it's just kind of its own culture. So, but the lyrics in some of their songs have also opposed child abuse, racism, domestic violence, and bigotry of any kind. So there are definitely positive messages in their music as well. Juggalos kind of consider themselves to be a family and just a really tight knit group of people that when you're in it, you're accepted. Everybody's just open and welcome. And like I said, it's just truly a lifestyle. And this is just an assumption on my part, but it seems to me like Jacob, who I read that he had been bullied as a kid, found the ICP movement and other white, well, not other, but and white supremacy groups to be sources of power and community for him. So they probably were good for his self-esteem and, allowed him to meet other people. The white supremacy part, not great.
Mm.
So on Jacob's MySpace profile, there were what are now very, very haunting lyrics from a song called Pass the Axe by a group called Dark Lotus. And this song there it features multiple artists, and basically like one artist will rap a verse, and then there's the chorus, and then another artist will take the next verse, and it's basically like they're passing a bloody axe to the next person in the song.
Charming.
Yeah. A portion of one of the verses goes a little something like this. I'm not going to rap it. Don't
Please
worry.
wrap it.
No, I
I
can't.
know everyone listening would really like it for you
Yeah.
to be
I
wrapped,
don't
for
I
it to
don't
be
have my
wrapped by you.
juggalo makeup on. I can't. Okay, here's part of one of the verses. I took the axe back to the shed where I stay, cleaned off the blood and then sharpened the blade. Waited till dark and then ran through the hood and chopped up drunk bums like they're blocks of wood. I can't see myself stopping. If I do, then I'm dead. And the only way I'm dying is if I sever my own head.
Well,
Yikes. And since he seems to like attacking people with hatchets, little alarming.
yeah. I, I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable about this. Do you know what I mean? Like, first of all, those lyrics are they're dumb, okay? They were put together for the purpose of just shock and awe. People that are fucking weird and like out there and but they love each other and they have compassion and community. The weirder the better, in my
Yeah,
opinion. That just makes life
exactly.
super interesting. But there are those people like Jacob who take it, they just cross the line and they take that and use it for evil ways
Exactly.
as opposed to a form of like self-expression.
When you're having swastikas all over your bedroom and tattooing yourself with white power bullshit.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's dangerous and people will eventually get hurt.
So back to Jacob's amazing bedroom. I wish that they would have found like Mickey Mouse shit and puffalumps or something, but it wasn't. It was
Buffaloes.
just gross. Along with the hate filled memorabilia, police found a note that he had left for his mommy. In it, he said that he loved her and he was sorry for the trouble he'd caused, but also said that if he had to go out, he had to go out by his own means. This was obviously very alarming to law enforcement because he was like on the run and it seemed like he was on a mission to hurt people. So police asked Jacob's father, David Robida, to try and reach out to his son and maybe, try and just convince him to turn himself in, come back, just anything to stop any more violence. But his dad said that he was just too emotionally upset to do such a thing, which
Okay.
is just a big pile of horse shit. And this makes me assume that his father, or maybe both of his parents, I know that they were not married, they were no longer together, that maybe they either agreed with Jacob's hateful views or just chose to completely ignore all of the red flags, literally red fucking Nazi flags. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but how the stuff in his room didn't set off some major alarms is beyond me.
I'd like to believe that his dad's not just scum. I want to assume positive intent. I wonder if there was something else going on. Maybe Jacob threatened his father or something
Maybe. Yeah,
and
I
his
don't
father
know.
was scared of him. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that would cause a parent who has a close relationship with their child to say, "No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to get involved with trying to talk my son off the ledge of hurting someone else."
Yeah,
After he's already buried a hatchet in two people's faces
and
and then took out a
shot.
handgun.
Yeah. So, police later learned that after leaving his mother's house, Jacob drove to a hospital in New Jersey to have the cut on his head from the pool cue looked at. Like it was a pretty deep gash. And he told the hospital staff that he was homeless and he used a fake name. So his head wound was treated and he was released from the hospital. But once the story of the attack made the news and, Jacob's picture was kind of being blasted all over the place, a worker at the hospital contacted police and was like, yeah, we just treated that guy for a cut on his head. He got stitches and he didn't give that name, whatever. And so they were trying to figure out, well, where the hell would he go from there? They were watching his MySpace account to see if he would maybe slip up and, give some clue as to where he was, but he didn't. So he was just kind of in the wind. And while authorities were looking hard for him, Jacob drove to West Virginia, where his ex girlfriend, Jennifer Bailey, lived. Now, Jennifer was 33 years old at the time. She was a twice divorced mother of three.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the two had met online. They spent a few weeks chatting over email or MySpace before they ended up meeting in person. And if you don't have a calculator handy, Jennifer was in her 30s, dating and living with a 16-year-old.
At the time, he was only 16.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
and his mama and dad didn't have anything to say about
I
this.
I don't know. I don't know. But it's gross.
That is so disturbing.
The age of consent in West Virginia and Massachusetts is 16. So technically their relationship was
She wasn't
legal,
breaking any laws.
but it still feels like 12 shades of ew. I do not like it at all. So in 2003, when Jacob was 16, he dropped out of high school. And
Oh,
a few weeks later, he got on a bus to St. Albans, West Virginia to live with Jennifer and her youngest child. So this was a couple years
okay.
before, but he dropped out of high school, went to live with her. And at that time, Jennifer was on disability for bipolar disorder, and her two older children were living with their father. I don't know the details as to why they weren't in her
Mm,
custody. I don't have ages, but only her youngest child was living with her at that time. There are conflicting reports regarding when Jacob began living with Jennifer, how long they were together, and why their relationship ended. Some reports
interesting.
said that he might have had his own place for a while and then ended up living with her. Some people said that he just drove there and immediately started living with her, but there's just kind of not a clear picture of their relationship. Some people close to Jennifer said that she ended things because Jacob was disturbed. Yeah. And Jacob's family said that Jennifer was controlling. So everybody's kind of blaming the other. It's all over the place. Regardless of why, their relationship ended after about a year. And early in 2005, Jacob moved back to Massachusetts from West
Okay.
Virginia. His family, said that Jacob was really different when he returned, that he was more withdrawn and just didn't seem very happy. And I'm assuming that this is probably when he really turned to that Juggalo family and got more involved with these white supremacy groups because he was looking for people.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he probably felt connected to these other people either through their shared love of music or just fucking hating people.
Hmm.
So, just to recap really quick, after fleeing Massachusetts and going to a hospital in New Jersey, Jacob drove to West Virginia and he ended up going straight to the apartment that he had once shared with Jennifer. And so, this would have been the night of February 2nd.
Okay.
So,
The next night.
yeah, the attack was the night before. He drove, made it to West Virginia. But when he got to that apartment, Jennifer was no longer living there. So they obviously hadn't spoken in a while.
Yeah.
And so he's like, fuck. And he ended up going to another apartment where one of his old neighbors was still living that he knew while he lived there. And that neighbor actually knew where Jennifer's new apartment was. And she
And
was,
didn't tell him.
no, she was now living about 15 miles away in Charleston, West Virginia. And they took Jacob right to her new place.
Peachy.
Yeah, Jacob, knocked on the door and he was like, "Hey, can I stay with you?" And she was like, no. No, you can't." And she wouldn't even let him inside. She was like,
Smart.
fuck that." And she ended up calling a friend later that night and had left them a message and just had said, like, "Jacob came by earlier and he asked if he could stay, but I don't want him here because of the attack in Massachusetts." So she obviously knew
She was
that
aware.
he was on the run. So Jacob was like, "Fuck." And he ended up staying with that former neighbor that night because they felt bad that he had nowhere to go. And that neighbor, by everything that I read and by all the accounts, didn't know that Jacob was wanted by law enforcement and on the run, and that they were, unknowingly harboring a fugitive. So they were just
Okay.
trying to be nice and just didn't want him to have to like sleep in his car that night. So, investigators in Massachusetts had learned about Jennifer and Jacob's relationship after speaking with his family and friends. So police in West Virginia were contacted and they went to Jennifer's apartment, but nobody was home. So they're like, all right. They later learned that Jennifer had dropped her youngest child with her mother off that night. So this would have been February 3rd, and was just, basically said, like, I'm going out for a birthday celebration and I'll be out until midnight or so. Didn't give her a lot of details, and then nobody knew where they were.
Oh, no.
So they believe that sometime the night of February 3rd, so while Jennifer was allegedly out at this birthday celebration, Jacob broke into Jennifer's dad's house and stole 2 guns. And the next part of the story is a bit of a mystery, and we'll get to why later. So investigators were kind of stuck just trying to piece things together on their own. But somehow Jacob and Jennifer left West Virginia and they headed west in his Grand Am. And the biggest unknown piece of this crazy puzzle is whether Jennifer went with him willingly or if she was kidnapped by Jacob. Most people close to her said that she would never have gone freely and left her children. And they don't know if Jacob was already with her when she dropped off her kid, or if maybe he got to her after that and forced her to go. It just is really unknown. When she had talked to her friend and left the message the night that Jacob showed up at her house, it seemed like she was scared of him and didn't want to get involved with any chaos that him being on the run might bring. But she also didn't call authorities to tell them that he had shown up at her house.
Hmm.
So it's kind of hard to gauge where she was in this situation. Police later found surveillance footage from an ATM where Jennifer withdrew $500 and from a store where they had stopped to get a few grocery items before hitting the road. In the video, she didn't seem scared or like she was being forced to do anything. Investigators later found 2 bags of clothing in the car, one with her clothes and one with his. And so this left some people to speculate that maybe she was choosing to go with Jacob and took what she would need to be on the run for a few days. But on the other hand, again, he could have easily held a gun to her head and forced her to pack a bag and made her go with him. It's not clear where they were heading or what their plans were, or if she was a willing participant. But somehow they made it to Arkansas. So,
Okay.
like I said, this case takes us on quite a journey through the US. So, on Saturday, February 4th, Jacob was pulled over in the very small town of Gassville, Arkansas, by a part time police officer named James Sell. And Officer Sell was 63 years old. Now, even though an alert for Jacob and his vehicle had gone out to law enforcement nationwide, this particular precinct or these officers hadn't been informed of that. So he was just pulled over for a routine traffic stop. I'm not sure why, but it wasn't because he was wanted for attempted murder in Massachusetts. At some point along their journey, Jacob had stolen Kentucky license plates and swapped them out on the car. So even if this officer was actively looking for that particular vehicle, it could have easily slipped by
Right.
because it had different plates. Anyway, Jacob and Officer Sell pulled into a parking lot, and this was of the Brass Door Restaurant and Hotel, which sounds
Mm.
fancy, around 2:30 that afternoon.
I'll say broad daylight.
Yeah, and what is known about what happened next comes from the manager of this particular hotel named Marianne. She was working in the hotel and ended up hearing gunshots outside. So she, peeked
No.
out the window and saw a patrol car with its lights on in the parking lot. And she could then see Officer Sell lying on the ground bleeding
No. No.
and was obviously severely injured. She immediately called 911 and was able to, still kind of watch out the window as Jacob jumped back in his car and started to drive off. But then she saw that his car kind of circled around the building and came back to where Officer Sell was lying on the ground and did something and then ended up driving off. Police later discovered that he had gone back to get his ID that Officer Sell had taken during the traffic stop. He then got back in his car and took off down the highway. So other officers arrived at the scene after, getting the 911 call, but unfortunately, Officer James
Mm.
Sell ended up losing his life.
Ah,
It's
damn.
not clear exactly how the incident went down, but he was shot 3 times by Jacob, once in the neck, once in the head, and once in the arm.
Oh my gosh. Poor Officer Cell.
I know. So officers, obviously, since one of their own was killed, they were immediately on the hunt for Jacob, and a high-speed chase ensued that went on for about 16 miles.
Mm.
They set up multiple roadblocks, but he would just fly right through them. He was just being really reckless. Police were able to lay down some spike strips that eventually disabled his vehicle. His shredded tires caused him to eventually kind of lose control, and he hit some parked cars, and the impact of hitting those cars spun his car around so that he and Jennifer were now facing the growing sea of police officers that had surrounded them. It was kind of like, all right, this is the end of the road, like
Mm-hmm.
we're not getting out of this. So Jacob and Jennifer could be seen hugging and, just embracing multiple times inside the car before Jacob opened fire and began just shooting randomly towards all these officers that had surrounded them. Jacob then leaned over and he hugged Jennifer one last time before he put the gun to her head and pulled the trigger, killing her instantly. He then raised the gun to his right temple and shot himself.
Oh my God. I did not
Yeah,
see that coming.
yeah.
I thought he was going to go out by death by cop.
Police responded to Jacob's gunfire. He was hit by a second bullet to his head, but was still alive.
Wait, so he shot himself in the head, then he was shot in the head, and he was still alive?
He still, yeah.
This bastard won't die.
So he was taken into custody and was initially transported to a nearby hospital somewhere in Arkansas, but was then flown by helicopter to another hospital in Springfield, Missouri. He ended up dying early in the morning of February 5th, and he was buried 6 days later on February 11th, 2006, in a private ceremony in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So, following an autopsy, it was determined that Jacob was killed by the bullet from his own gun, not by the shot from police.
Okay.
So,
He successfully took his own
yeah,
life.
he's assaulted 3 people, nearly killed 3 people, and now there are 3 people who are dead. And there are still a ton of unanswered questions in this case. Like, where was Jacob trying to fucking go? When police searched the vehicle, they found additional guns in the trunk, as well as, just like cans of soda and food, a small amount of cash, and the 2 bags that I'd mentioned of clothing, that belonged to him and Jennifer. Some people think that he may have been trying to cross the Mexican border, which is probably the most likely option. The area where they ended up in Arkansas was less than 50 miles from the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. And I
Oh,
don't know if that's like in a strip mall or an office complex or what that place
wait.
fucking looks like.
I'm sorry, color me ignorant, but this was in 2006 and the Ku Klux Klan had a headquarters?
Yeah, they're still a very active
Shut your fucking
organization.
face.
Yeah,
You're joking.
no.
I am highly disturbed about this.
I didn't know that there were headquarters, but it's
I didn't
still
either, but
a very active organization, which is fucked up.
that makes me nauseous. I
Yeah.
this
But
is
apparently
most
you can go
unwelcome.
to headquarters. I don't know what that consists of, if there's brochures, if it's like a recruitment office for the
Oh
armed
my God, like the
forces or
fucking army or
yeah.
something. So was there speculation that he was trying to get there?
Yeah, so some people were speculating that he might have been trying to get to them for shelter and protection. But
Oh my
this
God.
theory was pretty much squashed by investigators. And I mean, also, they were wondering, was this a planned murder suicide between Jacob and Jennifer, or was she just an innocent victim who'd been taken hostage? I mean, and as they're watching them embrace in the car before he killed her, was it like a this is goodbye because this is what we planned, or was she freaking out and scared and he was trying to comfort her? Like, there's so many things that they just will never know because the people who would know are now dead. And so it's just a really frustrating case. And it, so then why didn't he let her go and just kill himself? Like, it just, none of it really makes a lot of sense. So investigators were also looking to see if there were any other accomplices or friends who knew what Jacob was planning and were maybe kind of covering for him. But from what I can tell, he was a lone wolf and nobody else was involved with his attack. There's been a lot of criticism in this case and several other true crime cases about suspects of violent crimes being influenced by the music they listen to. I mean, you can even see this with like the Columbine killers
Mm-hmm.
because they listened to Marilyn Manson and that was
Right.
blamed, and video games and just, all these outside sources that cause people to kill. I had previously mentioned, that Jacob was a big fan of Insane Clown Posse and a proud member of the Juggalo family. I certainly don't think that simply listening to violent lyrics makes someone do or even have the desire to do violent things. But I do think that someone who is struggling with mental health could easily take those lyrics literally and choose to act on them, which is exactly what happened with Jacob. And so ICP was under a lot of scrutiny in this case following the investigation because, I mean, Jacob basically acted out the lyrics
Mm-hmm.
to some of their music. On February 7th, 2006, a statement was released by ICP's manager and president of their record label, Psychopathic Records. Sweet. Alex, I think it's Abyss, Alex Abyss. But in regard to the attacks, portion of the statement said, "First, I'd like to say that we'd like to extend our condolences to the victims and their families in this tragedy. Our prayers are with you. And with that said, I would now like to address the whole issue." This guy had problems. Anyone going into a bar swinging an axe and shooting a gun would have to realize that they would get caught and or get killed, and that this would be the last action they took for the rest of their lives, and would clearly have to be insane and out of their mind to do this. In my opinion, the perpetrator of this crime committed these acts not because he was a juggalo, but because he was a neo Nazi. He subscribed to an ideology of racism and bigotry and was quite clearly, in my opinion, out of his mind. Anyone that knows anything at all about juggalos knows that in no way, shape, or form would we ever approve of this type of bullshit behavior.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. So they were like, nah. Yeah, our lyrics might be a little bit out there. We might.
But it's just artistic expression. We're not
Yeah.
actually going out and harming people. And side note, we don't support that.
And if anything, we support inclusion and acceptance of everyone. And so there's blame on, like I said, video games and music and
Mm-hmm.
movies and just all these things. And it's like, but so many other people are doing that same thing and not committing crimes. It's just that focus kind of gets.
It's the human condition or the human nature to want to find a reason, an explainable reason. And to just chalk it up to he just snapped is really hard. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I actually don't even think Jacob snapped in this situation. This was carefully planned out.
And with that statement, I totally agree that I don't think it had anything to do with the music. Like, it may have
Mm-mm.
triggered some things in his brain as far as like using a hatchet or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but
Sure.
it was based on hate.
Yeah, the song didn't make him do it. Man. So, do you believe that Jennifer was a willing accomplice or not?
I really don't know. I could go either way. I mean, it sounds like she wouldn't have left her kids, but it's also like, I mean, she may have thought that she could stop him. She may have been forced to go. I really don't know.
Mm, okay.
Part of me thinks, why, when she was surrounded by people, did she not open that door, throw her hands up, and flee to one of the police officers?
I suppose. I have a different opinion.
Okay.
I don't think she was a willing accomplice. I think that she was probably had a gun in her face when he found her after more than a year of no communication whatsoever. He didn't even know she had moved. He had, the nice neighbor said, "Oh yeah, she moved to where she lives, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And so then he stayed the night at that neighbor's house, and then the next day he hunted her down and said, "Grab some clothes. We're going for a car ride, and it's going to be a while.
We're dropping your kid off and
We're
we're
dropping your
going.
kid off. You're going, tell him you're going to a birthday set. Tell him you're going out to dinner. Just tell him whatever the fuck you want, but don't tell him what's going on." I don't think his intention when he kidnapped her, I believe he kidnapped her and I believe he forced her to go with him. And here's why I don't think when Officer Sell pulled them over, she didn't say something or try to make a run for it. Here's why I believe when they were surrounded by all the cops and they were in the car and then the cops saw them embrace, that she didn't like open up her door and put her hands up and said, I surrender, take me. I think it takes a certain type of personality or a certain type of mindset for someone to say, I'm going to make a run for it because I'd rather get killed trying to make a run for it than just sitting here.
Right.
And I think there's different personalities to say, I'm going to sit here because I think my chances of survival, if I do what he says, are higher than if I make a run for it.
Right.
Knowing what he did in puzzles, and she just saw and witnessed him shoot and kill a police officer, she was probably shitting her pants scared.
Yeah.
And he probably threatened her like, if you say anything, if you try to leave, if you try to make a run for it, I will shoot you like a lame animal on a farm. I believe she was doing everything she could. And the reason why I have this opinion is because it's awfully coincidental that this shit happened in Massachusetts. He stops home for a little while. His mom's like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, he was bleeding, but I don't know. And he drives straight to the apartment they used to share in West Virginia, which
Mhm.
from Massachusetts to West Virginia, that's not like a 45-minute drive.
No.
You're in the car for a while. That's an intentional destination. She didn't know he was coming. When he knocked on her door, she was like, no, 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 no. I know what you did in Massachusetts. I broke up with you more than a year ago because you're creepy as fuck and you're disturbed. And that has not changed. So no, I'm not going to give you a place to stay. And she even told her friend about it. Like, I just don't see him coming back the next day and her going, you know what?
Just kidding. I love you. I
Just
missed
kidding.
you.
I
Let's do
remember
this.
all of the good times. So let's Thelma and Louise the fucking shit out of this, shall
Yeah.
we?
Yeah.
I just don't see that.
And the ATM too.
Yeah,
Like,
like she's gonna
obviously
a single mom taking out $500.
they bought all those groceries. I'm sure there was gas and shit. And so he was probably like, you're going to take out whatever you can, you
Yep.
know. Yeah, it just sucks that he chose to take her out too when he could have easily.
Let her go. What I don't know, what I am like, ugh, is if he intended to take her out at some point from the very beginning.
Mm,
Or was it, if I'm going to go, we're going to go together?
yeah. And also, was it, I still love you. Let's make this work. Or like, you fucking broke up with me, bitch. You're going down with me.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
was
who
it a place of
knows?
love or anger that he was approaching her with, you
And
know?
it could have been a combo.
Yeah.
I just believe that she was probably fucking scared out of her goddamn mind and didn't have the disposition of someone that would have tried to make a run for it after being threatened and seeing him literally kill a police officer.
Right.
And the hug, he could just be like, give me a hug. You know what I mean? She could just be doing anything. I
Like, he could have said, "Give me one last hug, and then you go.
Probably.
You
And
run,
then,
and then I'm gonna turn myself in or whatever." And she was just
yeah.
like, "Okay." She could have been scared out of her mind sitting there crying, and
Hmm.
he was trying to console her and then just blindsided her and killed her.
Yeah.
Like, but it sucks not knowing
Yeah.
what those conversations were in that car, like what was happening on that road trip. And
Man.
yeah, so it's like, god damn it, there's just no answers to what was actually going on.
Yeah.
So
Wild. That's wild.
yeah,
And also, not happy that there's a headquarters for Ku Klux Klan. Not
I
happy at all
know.
about that.
Or that it still even fucking exists.
I don't like that.
But
Fuck.
yeah, so that is the story of the mayhem and chaos caused by Jacob Robida and the unfortunate deaths of Jennifer Bailey and Officer James Sell.
I'm so stoked that the first victims that you introduced survived.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There was like a rainbow shield.
For sure.
So, on that note, goodbye, Carrie.
Goodbye, James.
I'm recording, fuckers.
Don't you fucking do that.
Man, oh man.
Because I was like, that's not my...
You shut your asshole mouth.
You didn't hear my burp?
Attaboy.
Bada bing, bada fucking boom.
She is bouncing her titties, all right.
That's disgusting.
Excuse me.
It's